So Spain and Portugal could easily power Europe, right?
And
And
you also have the water because I saw the grid, the solars are on water as well.
yeah, so in Netherlands, there's a lot of water. They've reclaimed the ocean, but there's a premium on land, but you could have floating solar. But we can have solar glazing, solar cladding, solar roofing, agrivoltaics. No one gets more productivity out of a hectare of land than a Dutch farmer, but the farmer can now farm solar panels as well.
In a world yearning for change, there exists a community of visionaries and innovators, united by a common goal to solve Earth's biggest challenges. As role models for future generations, we're building a world where wisdom and consciousness rise, harmonizing life with nature and all species. Join us. Together, let's create a balanced, sustainable future for all.
So we see the grid as being congested by existing players, but also the grid has not been upgraded. The utilities have not upgraded the grid and done proper forward planning for the adoption of renewables. So the transmission lines and the grid proper is lagging significantly behind in the uptake of green energy transmission. So what happens is that the development around the edges needs local generation and local consumption. So we can take our distributed thinking around blockchain and make a more anti-fragile grid by having systems that are built around more like internet thinking of how the grid should be designed or transitioned to, rather than the way that the grids have been designed with a centralized source like Niagara Falls, and all the wires coming from some hydro plant or a nuclear plant or a coal plant or a gas turbine. So we see that the grids will become bidirectional, and we need to have systems in place that allow a bidirectional grid, but also to have apportioned access to the grid. So someone with a solar panel that's in my neighborhood can share the energy from that solar panel and only be charged the right, let's say, amount of transmission fee to send it 10 meters to his neighbor, rather than send it 100 kilometers to some other grid provider. Because the electrons will flow where the resistance is lowest, and this apportioned access to the grid is one of the major policy headwinds that we have in the whole industry.
What do you think about the possibility to transmit energy through Wi-Fi from space?
Yeah, I like the idea. It's not quite Wi-Fi, but yeah, it's microwave transmission. Yes. Yep.
Okay. And what are the pros and cons for this?
So from outer space, space is not a frontier for a lot of entrepreneurs. There's only billionaires that have access to space. So I would say that it's not really a way to democratize both the access and ownership of energy. There will be ways that transmission from space will be enabled, but it will be for, I would call it the panopticon of the space and weapons industry. Space is going to be colonized by governments and let's call it weapons type industries before it'll be colonized by democratic citizens. So we see that a lot of the space access is not necessarily fair and democratizing the asset. And there's enough land around the world to put enough solar panels, even with the current technology, to allow for energy abundance. We do not need to bring all the solar panels required into space for this to happen. There's a number of other toxic problems in having to ship that much, let's call it, weight into space. You're burning kerosene or a very high grade of kerosene to get into space. There's no other way to do that economically. So Tesla does this at a very low cost per ton, but still there's a lot of kerosene that will be burnt to get that potential generation into space.
Okay, fair enough. I believe that at Stanford they are working on this technology, but you're right. Usually such technology can be taken by the big players, and we want something that is more accessible to everyone.
Well, I think they will do it for generating satellite power, for powering, let's call it a constellation of satellites that need to be repowered. And they will be doing experiments in space that need a lot more energy than they're able to generate right now in the space stations. So I do think that there will be massive solar collectors in space, but I do not see that this will solve a lot of the energy problems in the world, certainly not energy poverty. And we have enough, like, there's only a few thousand of square kilometers required in Africa to power the whole Earth, right? So of course the sun's not hitting Africa all the time, but you could balance this quite well as the Earth rotates around the sun to have enough capacity to really track this capability. So Spain and Portugal could easily power Europe, right?
And you also have the water, because I saw the grid, the solars are on water as well.
Yeah, so in Netherlands, there's a lot of water. They've reclaimed the ocean, but there's there's a premium on land, but you could have floating solar. But we can have solar glazing, solar cladding, solar roofing, agrivoltaics. No one gets more productivity out of a hectare of land than a Dutch farmer, but the farmer can now farm solar panels as well. So there's a lot of ways that, as I said, this is a multiple choice question, and the right answer is all of the above.
I really love this, a farmer to farm solar panels. Yeah, to have this option where you have the dry land and where you cannot cultivate anything. I
No, but
really,
even when you cultivate, you can put vertical solar
oh
panels. They
yeah.
collect the sun from each side, and they peak in the morning and in the evening when the energy is really required. They don't produce when the sun is overhead at noon, but there's lots of other solar around that does that. So
Oh,
it
and
helps
some
to
could
offset.
produce this way, because I
Correct.
saw for animals can just stay out of the sun under those
Yeah.
panels as
Yeah.
well.
They do that as well for sheep and for cattle. Yeah.
Yeah, this is cool. So if you would have all the influence and money, and knowing what you know right now, how would you solve this issue to just connect the world and solve this green
Yeah, so
energy?
I've done a podcast before. We are solar punks. So we're not cyberpunks or cyberpunks. We're solar punks, and we disavow the status quo. It is not acceptable for us, right?
Right.
We can build a system that is sustainable where we put solar and energy abundance everywhere, and we can now programmatically balance a grid at the edge so that a small community can be in charge of their own self-sovereign minimum energy. And when they have peaks during the day, they can pull from other neighborhoods or from the grid to really balance this out. The holy grail for this is storage, because solar plus storage right now in the world beats any gas turbine and the cost of fuel for deployment. So right now, solar plus storage is below what's called grid parity costs in generation. So the future potential is here now. It's just not evenly distributed. This is the challenge: is the human condition, the policy headwinds, and just the political will to do it, but also the problem of NIMBY, not in my backyard. So we need to make solar panels more accessible, solar panels more architecturally attractive. So architectural cladding that are solar panels, architectural roofing that look like roofing that people would want to see. So this is all possible as well.
And if everyone would align, because I see openness now, even from the political will aspect, which is very optimistic. How many years do you think that we could just put things in motion with what we have today?
It's a two decade journey. Yeah, it'll take 2 decades, but by that time, solar will double in the next 2 years, and it will double 2 or 3 years after that. So by 2030, we will have 4 trillion to 5 trillion dollars worth of panels deployed around the world. By 2040, we see that there will be $2 trillion per continent of new solar deployed in the world, not Antarctica. So, if you look at North America, South America, each $2 trillion worth of solar, Europe, India, and around Asia Pac and Australia, that's about 5 continents worth of solar. And those about $10 trillion of solar will be deployed. Absolutely massive.
And did you do the calculation as well that together with this replacement, how we reduce the carbon emissions and how much, what would those be in 2030 and 2040?
Sure, I don't have to do those calculations. This has been done already by some very strong modeling done by engineers.
Okay.
There's a guy called Saul Griffith. He wrote the book Electrify Everything. There's other Stanford engineers that show with solar plus wind and storage that most of the world's economies can shift to renewables. And there's a very well-known YouTube and guy, and he has a channel. His name is Tony Seba, Seba. And Tony basically has shown that solar plus storage plus battery can really displace all fossil fuels. We do not need them. We should not be drilling new oil. We should not be shipping it in tankers. If we reduce the amount of oil shipped by tankers, 40% of all the oil consumed is by shipping oil. So just think of the network effects in reducing the oil consumption. We're going to reduce 40% of all the transport required for oil. So it's just an amazing exponential curve of displacement will happen.
How would you see this on ships, like solar panels on ships, or how?
No, solar. So ships will have to use fossil fuels for a long time, but not to ship oil. They'll use it for transporting other things. You can use other fuels like e-fuels, and eventually solar will be so cheap, we'll be able to make synthetic fuels, so electrically based fuels to do this. So green electrons become green molecules. So it'll be solar produced methanol will eventually fuel these ships.
Okay, and because you know already the data, so in 2030, if we get to this 4 to 5 trillion in solar panel, what would that be in reduction? Would be better with the plan?
It would be towards 20%, kind of reduction. The challenge is that the bankers are still funding the fossil fuel companies to drill new oil, to drill new corridors for pipelines, to keep on doing this. So the challenge is that the policy is political speak, but the reality is bankers still are funding. Okay, these fossil fuel assets will become stranded, and then what they'll do is they'll socialize the losses on humanity. Because they'll walk away from oil wells that need to be capped and shut down properly. They'll just abandon these assets. And so there has to be a proactive, let's call it transition, where there's a policy engagement to fix and decommission these fossil fuel assets, right? So, but right now, the banks of the world are still funding fossil fuel companies in a huge way.
So it would be a big impact if there will be a boycott and a finger showing to these bankers to not fund these projects,
and
right?
there is attempts to do this, right, by informed technologists that know how to set policy at scale at the governmental level. And guess what? The best people doing this is China and another command economy called Singapore. And the next one will be India that will displace fossil fuels. They will.
Yeah, that is crazy. I saw the development in China. Now they are, in a couple of years, they will be like...
They're still building coal plants, but in 10 years, they'll start to decommission them, right? So that's what will happen.
Yeah, and I saw that they invested tons of money. I mean, they just rise on huge scale, the solar panels around the country.
Yeah, but now they're doing storage. They will lead the world on storage and export that technology around the world. Now, all these governments around the world want their own self-sovereign energy, their own self-sovereign manufacturing of energy assets. So there's a lot of pushback on Chinese panels and Chinese made batteries. But the reality is that China has won the race to get to a low-cost paradigm to deliver solar. They're well ahead of every other country for low-cost battery as well. And the uptake, must be there around Europe and Africa and India to take on board these Chinese manufactured assets. They don't need to be assembled in China. We can still do assembly in local manufacturing, but the core raw ingredients of these things over the next 3 to 5 years will come from China.
So after they became the manufacturer of the world, they shifted very quickly. They saw because of their air quality that they need to shift very quickly, and now they will become the green energy solution for the world.
They'll be green energy mavens. They will, but they'll also enable with Belt and Road new players like Congo, Tanzania,
The Africa market.
of Africa.
I know they are invested there.
They will fund them with critical assets to do this, right?
Yeah.
And these assets are not a noose around these nations. These are wealth-producing assets. If you build a road for a nation in Africa, yes, China does that, but does a road create any domestic wealth? It reduces the friction to move product and help the economy, increase their GDP. But energy is directly proportional to wealth. In my modeling and my kind of mind, if you can decrease the cost of energy, you will increase the GDP and the wealth of the people. And you can do this in Africa and leapfrog, where they are now. So everything is a system, and we approach our opportunity holistically, because we cannot engage and do what we want to do without the system working. The system of government, the system of local government, where the panels are going to be deployed. We don't see building these big solar parks as being the solution to all of our needs. This is a gigawatt solar park behind me in Dubai, but this park has got a story behind it. It is maintained by slave labor, basically Filipinos and Indians living in Dubai. They're a second-class economy in Dubai. You don't see them when you are a tourist and you go to Dubai, right? So the only way to maintain or to enable and grow these assets, that big solar fields, is to have machine learning, AI, and eventually robotics. It will be the only ethical way to deploy these panels as well. Yeah, we think we have exponential technology to empower and create a platform for solar panel ownership to allow the abundance of both the access to solar and the ownership of solar. So Sunified allows individuals to own a piece of solar as a property right on of the actual solar panel. And I'm not sure if you know about wealth creation around the world, but if you have the rule of law that enables ownership of property, then in general you can build an economy around property rights and the rule of law for who gets to own and exploit those property rights. And we think that solar and solar ownership really becomes paramount to these new types of industry ecosystems. So the chips go into solar panels. What we're trying to do is to get data at the edge for each solar panel, but we create a type of new data set on top of solar. It becomes a data lake. Every 30 seconds, we encrypt the data that's coming from that solar panel, and we link it to its prior panel, link it to its prior panel, and we create a blockchain database that creates and locks in the value from the energy manufactured by that solar panel. So instead of Bitcoin, called proof of work, we call our initiative proof of fusion, proof that the sunlight hit the panel and caused electron flow. This solar panel sensor allows us to measure that in a bottom-up way, aggregate that business value and technical economic value of those green electrons. So we collect park data, then we have networks of parks, and then we have global solar data. Eventually, we want a global network of solar data. So eventually, there's a layer cake of solar data, networks of data, and global data. This provides 5 values for the industry and new players. We deliver a stamp, a proof of origin that the energy came from something clean and green, a solar panel. We monitor the panel so it can be maintained, when to clean it, when to cut the grass around it. Is there any faults on the panel, such as those hot spots that I talked about? And is our sensor performing properly in the panel? So our sensor monitors itself, but it can also monitor its neighborhood. So if there's any short circuits or increasing of resistance from one panel to another, we have a network intelligence because we don't have to go back to a central authority to look at a report. The network watches itself, the network of solar panels and our sensors. This high fidelity data can
I
be
was on mute. Just a second. I want to interrupt here because I would love to make clear, especially that I see the proof of origin as something it's very interesting. Let's say that you and I, we are different in different countries and we have solar panels. And due to your technology, I could verify in 5 minutes instead of 39 days offset, let's say, from where the green energy would come in case I needed extra from what I produce?
Yeah, so we can't transport electrons from Africa to Europe, using our technology. But what we can do is create the financial record of that electron being produced. If it was produced and delivered to a different type of, let's call it financial service or business utility, such as embedding infrastructure to a product or a service, such as agriculture, then we can actually create a type of credit debit swap economy from one country to another, backed by green electrons.
Okay, so depending on the circumstances like climate and temperature and dryness or the seasons, you can have different kind of things. Let's say that Africa needs more energy and doesn't get it only from Europe, and then you will have this kind of credits based on that period. But then again, you might produce much more that will come back to Europe, and then those things can equalize themselves in time, right?
Correct. Yes. Right now is the best way to do this is with a carbon tax, and carbon taxes punish carbon producing industries with a tax that the governments are supposed to reinvest into more green assets that will decarbonize industry. Now, a carbon tax, very similar to NOx and SOx, there used to be acid rain that would fall in Canada and kill the lakes. And what they did is they used a tax to create ways to upgrade the industry, to put in scrubbers in the chimneys to remove those toxic molecules so they did not combine in the atmosphere to create acid rain. So that was a tax system to change industry behavior. What we're trying to do is to create new economic models around green sustainability and to enable sourcing green energy to give a green signal so people will change their behavior to use green energy as an industry input. So it's a different way to provide the business drivers and the core economics to use green energy. There's ways that we use that data to provide virtual power plants. So I talked about, instead of having a centralized power plant and dispatching out, we use a distributed network to supply energy to customers. We have asset transparency with our sensor. It's also what's called a crypto anchor. So we can anchor that asset in the blockchain and provide a way for fractional ownership of that asset. So people in Amsterdam can own a bit of solar in Africa through property rights. We can also use the tokenization to tokenize the energy, the carbon credits, and the data coming from that solar panel. So there's the asset itself, but then there's the offtakes from the asset. The electrons, the carbon credits, and the data also can be monetized using blockchains. And then finally, we add cybersecurity to the network to increase the resilience against hackers that can hack these networks and energy systems and create not just mischief, but also create episodes that is effectively cyber warfare. So we want to make our energy systems cyber secure so they cannot be used for cyber warfare. So by upgrading each solar panel with our sensor, these are the 5 main things that we solve. Now, trying to do 5 things all at once is difficult. So what we do is we really provide value in the proof of origin and panel level monitoring first. And the rest of the upside is kind of a Trojan horse for the future.
Okay, so basically your product is a sensor, and that needs to be super, super precise and safe to be used on a global scale in all kinds of conditions.
Correct. And there's test labs that do that. Our sensor is proven in our own lab and the university lab, and then the final embodiment in China to put our sensor in the junction box for the solar panel, that will be tested again for environmental stresses, for fire, for degradation in the field. And those systems are also independently tested by test and safety labs as well.
And where can I see all the data? If I connect myself with the grid and I have one of your sensors, you will have a platform that is decentralized, and you can find those data that you are putting there, the proof of origin.
Yeah, so we are a data oracle and an auxiliary services network. We provide services to our network of stakeholders. So our stakeholders will make applications that you can see. If you're a solar panel owner operator, you will have an iPad app or a dashboard for monitoring the health of the solar panel.
Oh, I love that data oracle. And so you could have other companies who would just create little apps and products based on your app.
We don't have enough creativity nor enough time to make all the use cases work for just us. We are building an ecosystem of other parties.
Google Store or Apple Store. I can see here options for that, right?
Correct. We become a DApp. It's called a DApp store, a distributed app. So a distributed app, or a DAPP, is the lingo for blockchain apps.
DAPP. Okay.
Yeah. So we enable the platform for a multitude of business use cases, and we just get paid a click fee for our data or for the transactions that we enable.
That's the business model. Okay.
So we're building an ecosystem of parties, and these parties and stakeholders help us deploy the assets in the field, help us enable the assets to be the best that they can be for operational performance, but also they create the API stack for blockchain energy services and for doing cybersecure smart grid resiliency as well. So ultimately, if you look at what we're doing, our vision is to get started with our own sensors and to build some solar parks in Australia, but to enable a platform where others can do the same thing in their country. And so that's really what we're doing. We're building an ecosystem of users and a number of channels to market using our partners.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted you to think how big this is. So
Yeah.
I talked about what's going on in Australia. So this solar park is 1 gigawatt. This one here will be about 20 gigawatts. They're already building these 2 solar parks here towards 30 gigawatts in Western Australia, plus wind as well. So BP is building these huge solar parks. So in order to cover 20 gigawatts, you're dealing with thousands of square kilometers of land that need to be done, managed ethically. We need to be able to monitor these solar panels and make sure that they give proper yield. And the only way to do this is with machine learning, AI, and eventually robotics. So we see that our vision for 2050 is that there will be, 2 terawatts of solar deployed in Australia. We see that this is going to prove that energy will be the main export that Australia will do. solar energy will be one of the major exports that Australia gives to the region.
I wouldn't go with that 2050 because in 2050 I would want to see the entire world doing this, not like just Australia, because it would be too late
think
for us.
this is the written material. We think it will happen by 2040. This is all accelerating way fast, right? In 2 decades.
We don't have that time. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
But now, because Australia is not a big continent, but has a lot of land, if it would go with this project and even just put even more grids where they have free land, they could create energy for the whole world, I believe,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah. Yep.
They could, territory-wise, like
No,
square meters.
Australia could really do this. Absolutely. But you
Okay.
wouldn't want to do Australia for everything. You can use this thinking that's in Australia and deploy it in Africa. The real problem
For
with
sure.
financing trillions of dollars in Africa is the sovereign risk around this, the execution risk. Australia is self-sovereign. It is a secure and stable economy. It has a very strong rule of law for property rights. So Australia is the ideal showcase to get the scale for Sunified, but then to bring the training of this to the next level and to package this from the bottom up in different regions where we can exploit and execute the business plan.
Okay, got it.
Because if you try and build a 10 megawatt solar park in Africa, some of those solar panels find legs and walk off and they're stolen, right? This is because of the rule of law, but also the economic incentives to do that are quite high in Africa. A solar panel is a very useful thing to have and have in your own home. Just one solar panel can keep your fridge cool and power a small TV and power your phone. That's all you need for subsistence living in Africa. So we think that there's going to be a great lot of ways that we need to bootstrap these economies and provide solar in different ways to them. And even these panels that are recycled as they are deployed, they can be remarketed into Africa and the GCC and into Latin America, where people have poverty. And even a used solar panel is very useful in these regions.
What I was saying also that this could be like a demonstration purpose, just to show, you could have green energy for the entire world just from a land like Australia.